Good morning everyone, time to update you on the new solar panels that I'm installing here at home. Yep, I'm adding some solar panels. But I want to do this video rather than just tell you what I've got. I want to go through the process with you that I went through choosing the panels and choosing what inverter options and the cost options and trying to work out what I was going to do and whether it was good value. I want to share that process with you more than the actual panels. And it's a bit of a shame because it's blowing a hoolie out there. It's about 45-mile-an-hour winds, and I was hoping this morning to go up on the scaffolding and film this introduction actually up with the new panels, but an image of them will have to do, I'm afraid. Right, so let's start from the beginning. I've got 6.3 kilowatts of solar panels currently. That's in two arrays, a 3.9 kilowatt array, that was the first array I put up, and a 2.4 kilowatt array. Both of those are on the roof and they point south, almost directly south, so very good generation. So I want to add some solar panels. So the first thing to do for me is to look at the options. Where have I got space that I could put solar panels and add to the configuration? So on the house-wise, there are three options. So I've got the garage, which was actually where I was going to originally put some panels a year ago, but decided to squeeze them on the roof instead. Anyway, there's space there for three panels. Three, and I can get 370 watt panels. The higher the wattage, the bigger the size. So it's all about maximizing the space that's there. The other thing I've got to consider with this space on the garage roof is shading. Now it's south facing like the roof, it's the same angle like the roof, but it's lower down and it has some shading in the morning from my house. So as the sun comes up from the east, the gable of the house is shading the edge of the panels, and we're going to have some shading impact. And then in the end of the day, probably summertime, probably from about 4 o'clock onwards, something like that, we'll have shading from the neighbour's house as well start to hit the panels. So one of the things to consider with this location, with the three panels, is what do I want to do? Do I want some sort of optimization on there to help with the shading, or do I just want an ordinary inverter? One of the things that crosses my mind is that the shading occurs in the morning and last thing at night, so it's not during peak generation. So we're talking about saving percentages on smaller proportions of the solar generation that we get from the panels. So the actual savings from optimizing that roof might not be as big as you'd actually think. So I'm starting to wonder whether a string inverter for those three might work just as well as optimized panels. Anyway, we'll leave that for the moment, but those are the considerations for that space. The next thing is I've got a gable wall, an east-facing gable wall. It's a really large, tall, red brick wall with guttering and soil pipe. It's a pretty ugly wall, so adding some solar panels to that wall is not going to do any harm at all. I have permission from the wife. She actually thinks it will cover up some of the red brick, which is just too much of an expansive red brick for her. So she's keen, I'm keen. The downside of adding them on the east gable is, one, they're not south facing, so I'm not going to get as good generation, and two, obviously they're pointing directly down, so we don't get the same angle. But I'm not actually adding these panels for maximum kilowatt hour generation for the year. I'm not looking at fit payments and being paid for how much I generate. So the total amount I generate isn't necessarily the objective here. The objective is to get usable kilowatt hours, usable power, especially first thing in the morning and especially at winter. So my thought is, actually I might sacrifice how many kilowatt hours I get throughout the entire year, but actually it might really help in those winter months. Maybe not, you know, December and January as much as I'd hope in the really worst of winter, because there isn't enough light anyway, but certainly on those outside edges of winter, I'll certainly get better generation first thing in the morning. So it'll help recharge the battery first thing in the morning, it'll help cook our breakfast from solar energy a little bit easier, it will help heat the hot water sooner, leaving more energy in the afternoon free for other things. So for me, adding panels to the east gable makes some sense for that usable kilowatt hours. It's spreading out what I'm getting. Because my panels are all south facing currently, I'm basically gaining some more kilowatt hours and gaining some more power earlier in the morning, especially in summer. It'll be very early when they start lighting up. There is some shading effect. I have some trees across the road, which with really low sun in the winter causes shading. But again, that shading is only first thing in the morning. So probably in November, I took some images like this one, I think, and that was at 7:30 in the morning in November. So it's very, very early, and that shading disappears quickly. So we're talking about small proportions of time, first thing in the morning, where I'm going to get shading, and only in winter. So yes, it's a small percentage that I'm losing through the shading, but it shouldn't be huge overall. And therefore I've got the same conundrum again. Is a string inverter what I want there, or should I try to optimize them? Now, one of the things you start to think about is, you know, I've got plenty of money, let's say, and I can spend an extra £1,000. Let's go with Solaredge, and let's put a Solaredge inverter up and optimize us on all those panels and get every kilowatt hour I can get off them and maximize that. So you're thinking, as the sun is hitting the east gable and I'm losing some power because of shading, that will optimize it and that will help. And then as the sun passes the gable and the east panels on the gable start to go dull and are shaded, then the south facing panels on the garage, they would illuminate, and obviously Solaredge would start to power those panels at full speed. Well, that's what you think. My thoughts about how Solaredge worked was that each panel was optimized perfectly, and therefore on different faces and different angles, Solaredge would have one panel on, one panel off, one panel half power, and all those sort of things. I thought it just optimized it. But the more I look at it and the more you investigate the technicalities, it's more about optimizing string voltage. So the problem that you might have is if you haven't got your different let's call them arrays, like the 3 panels on the garage and the 3 or 4 panels on the gable. If you think of each one as an array, if you put them on one string and try to optimize it, as the sun leaves that gable and shines more heavily just on the garage, then the voltage will drop because those panels on the gable have disappeared. Now, if the voltage drops, then Solaredge will try to increase the voltage to optimize it. But the problem with increasing voltage, that means you're reducing amps, and if you're reducing amps, you're not getting the power. That's how it works, I believe. So in this case, the solution of using Solaredge for my garage and the gable might not actually be optimal. It might not work as well as a string inverter. The way that I might get that configuration to work well with an optimized configuration is to use the 8 panels that are south facing already on my roof that are connected to a Solaredge inverter. I could take those optimizers off because they are dual optimizers with a mini inverter. I could take those optimizers off and put standard single optimizers on and connect all those 8 panels along with the 3 on the garage and the 3 or 4 on the gable as well. So if I connected them all together, more panels, then I think Solaredge would work much, much better in that configuration. Let's just finish off with what the third option was. The third option that I have is the north-facing roof. I've got the whole north-facing roof. It's huge. I could easily fit 4.5 kilowatts of solar panels there. Now, I've done the research, and it's quite surprising that the east-facing gable, if I have the panels mounted quite low down, will generate about 420 kilowatt hours per square metre of panels per year. If I raise those panels up the wall, it can rise up to about 520 kilowatt hours per square metre per year. But if I put the panels on the north-facing roof, I thought I'd be getting less, but you don't. You actually get more. The modelling that we've done comes up with 620 kilowatt hours of energy generated on the north roof per square metre per year. So actually installing them on the north roof would gain me more energy than on the east gable. But the problem is when you look at the modelling, and we've done it in such detail that we've ran a year's worth of sunshine details through a modelling algorithm for the configuration to see what every single half-hour period does of every single day of a year. So I can see the maximums in summer, and I can see the worst cases in winter and the best days in winter. I've looked through it in quite a bit of detail. And what I can see is, overall, the north-facing array would get about 55% of the power comparable to the panels if they were on the south-facing side. So 55% is not bad. If I install 4.5 kilowatts of solar panels on the north roof, then I'm getting basically the same amount of power that I would if I put 2.25 kilowatts of solar panels on the south-facing side. So yes, I'm paying twice as much for the same amount of kilowatt hours, basically. But there's another but. The more you look into it, when you look at winter, those numbers go down to about 20 to 25%. So I'm only getting a quarter of the value in winter that I would if they were south-facing. So in the critical months that I'm looking to add solar panels and gain more power, I'm putting 4.5 kilowatts of solar panels on the roof, and I'm only getting 1 point something kilowatts of actual power equivalent if they were south facing. So it's a lot of money. It's about £5 extra, I think, to put the north facing panels on. So it's a large undertaking for a very, very small gain. Now, if money doesn't matter and I want that gain, then it's more kilowatts. So I have the space, I could do it. There is some gain to be made there. But again, with the issue with things like Solaredge and low voltage and whether the voltages will work correctly in winter, if those panels, and it's a large array, don't illuminate well enough, how will that affect the optimization with Solaredge? I'm really not quite sure how it would work with a north-facing roof. I might, again, be better off with just a string inverter, even though I've got a chimney stack which does have some shadows drawn across it at certain times of year, especially the summer. But the thing that has convinced me not to install on the north roof was actually cleaning of the panels. I notice on the north side of the house we actually get green algae on the paving slabs that I have to pressure wash off every year. I notice the roof tiles have moss on them, and the window ledges gain some green algae as well. So cleaning of the panels would have to occur, I think, several times a year, especially over the winter period. And that's an additional cost, an additional hassle that I don't really want. Now you could say, well, just get a long extended pole and clean them, but our roof is so tall and at such an angle, I would need at least a 10-metre pole to be able to do that. And then you can't get enough purchase and weight on the actual brush head to clean them very well at all. So I don't think I could do it at all, even if I bought my own equipment. It would be better to get a professional to do it. And then you're talking about maybe not just using deionized water, you might be talking about using a special chemical to prevent the moss buildup as well, or the algae buildup. So I'm a little bit apprehensive because I haven't seen any real-world examples. I was so tempted to do it, to give a real-world example of what it's what it's like installing on the north-facing roof, but I had to stop myself from saying yes to a 5,000 cost just to be able to share with you all how it actually worked. So I'm not actually going ahead with that. Maybe if I wanted to do a test, maybe if there was an opportunity with solar panels, I could add a single panel up on the roof at certain times of year or something for a test and try something. Yeah, I'm really not sure of the opportunities for that, but I've decided not to go with the north roof. So I've actually installed solar panels on the garage. We've got 3 on there. They are 370 watt black panels to match the black panels, black frames and black panel that are currently on the roof. Now, I've done it to try and match it, but of course, because they're at different heights, the light shines on them at a different angle anyway, and wherever you're standing, the panels on the garage look a lot blacker than the ones that are on the roof. So it's quite interesting that I've tried to match them, but actually they do look slightly different. The ones on the garage stand out as being blacker. The ones on the east gable, I've gone for something completely different. I've actually gone for silver frames and the normal blue-black solar panel where the cells and the aluminium lines are more visible. I've done that because I thought it would be better to have like a frame effect around the solar panels, almost like the frame of a window, and that would blend because of the 2 windows that are on the gable. So I was starting to think that the frames wouldn't be a bad thing, and if I went for black, they might actually stand out too much on the wall. So I've gone for normal panels, also because it means I can get the longer panels. So I've gone for JA Solar 450 watt panels that are dual cells. So they're split in half and they're effectively optimized inside of the panel for the two different halves of the panel. So I've gone for those. They're almost 2 meters long, so they're quite long, but I've got that height on the wall, so I don't have a problem. And what I worked out was I could get more panels on if I put 370 watt or even 390 watt black panels. I could get more panels up there, but actually with the 450 watt and the space, I'm gaining almost as much power for having fewer panels installed. Fewer panels, fewer optimizers, lower cost. So I've gone for what I think is an optimum configuration of not being silly and filling the entire wall and cladding it in solar panels and making it look terrible. I know it's... Some people can say, what on earth have you done putting solar panels on the wall? It's going to look really weird. So I've tried to make it as aesthetically pleasing as possible without being over the top. And so far, good reactions. Susan's happy with them, and our daughter has actually said, oh wow, actually from a distance, she thinks they look really, really nice. So for someone to say they look nice, where I was just hoping that they would look all right, I'm quite pleased so far. So how they look was quite a consideration for the gable, because I think it is something that you're not quite certain of how your house will look adding so many solar panels and being renowned in the neighbourhood as, oh, that solar man. I don't want to really stand out too much, but I definitely want to take the opportunity and add solar panels and make use of the space that we have. So that's what I've done. 4 450 watt panels. That's 1.8 kilowatts on the east gable, and 3 370 watt all black panels on the garage. That's 1.1 kilowatts. So I'm adding 2.9 kilowatts of power to our already configuration of 6.3. So yeah, 9.2 kilowatts of solar panels are currently installed on the house. Now the problem with that is that seems, wow, I'm really happy, 9.2 kilowatts. But remember that these panels are in locations where I'm not getting very good power. I'm not getting optimal power from them throughout the year. So my kilowatt hours per kilowatt of solar panel installed, that number is going to come right down. The performance of my overall system is going to look worse by having those panels, because they're not performing anywhere near as good as the south-facing panels. So yes, 9.2 kilowatts of solar panels, but I don't know percentage-wise how much I'm actually adding. I've yet to work that out and see the actual numbers. Hopefully, it's worth it. Now, for those that love return on investment and whether it's a good investment, how much money are you spending, and all those sort of things, yeah, this is a bit of a folly. This is not justifying at all, because when you're putting solar and batteries in, you're putting the smallest amount in and making the largest gains. The more you put in, the smaller the gains are. It's ever diminishing returns on trying to save those last few kilowatt hours. So it does get more expensive the more you add. So this does not cost justify. I will not be paying back these solar panels in a small amount of time. But it will pay dividends in enjoyment, in reward, and usability and flexibility. What I notice with having solar power is when you're restricted, when you don't have as much, you do feel like not turning things on. You might not think so before you've got the solar panels, but when you've got them, you do try harder to use energy that's free and clean and green. And you do try to use your own energy as much as you can. So the less you have, the more constrained you might feel. And then you get into those situations with the wife where she's having to say, can I turn the oven on? Whereas if you had more solar power and more battery storage, all of those things go away and you have more freedom, you can do what you want. So for me, adding this extra solar and adding the home storage battery that I'll describe in another video, that's all about that flexibility. It's all about enjoying and having enjoyment from using our own energy and saving those last few kilowatt hours. It's not about making money. And for me, this last bit, yeah, it's more of a hobby, I guess. But installing the first part of the solar panels and the first part of your home storage battery in smaller proportions, that makes really big savings, and that's where the returns are. So don't be put off by me saying it's not going to pay for itself. It does if you size it right, If you oversize it and go mad with it, of course it'll take longer. Anyway, that's what we're doing. What I haven't told you is what inverter I am connecting that to. Now, that's because they're not fully operational yet. We are working out what will be the best configuration for me and what to go for, because I could do all sorts of things here, really. I could actually go for 2 Solaredge inverters for the garage and the east gable. I could put a 1 kilowatt inverter up just for the garage, and then I could put another 2 kilowatt inverter up on the east gable. So I could go for Solace inverters and go for 2 separate inverters. I could go for another string inverter with 2 MPPTs and have them as separate strings on the same inverter of, say, a 2.5 kilowatt size. There's lots of options, and we're trying to test it and trying to work out with some extra modelling which one to actually go for. So more news on the exact inverter soon. It shouldn't be long, hopefully. And then we can start talking about how much generation I'm getting and how much extra that's adding to our configuration. I've seen it operational already in a couple of days, and it has changed the shape of my peak in the morning. I'm starting to see peak power at 10:30 in the morning, where it would normally be 12:30. So we're actually getting peak power a little bit earlier because of those gable panels, and that's before the scaffolding comes down. So yeah, I'm quite impressed with what we're doing. Looking forward to them being fully operational. Basically, there were so many panels, so many options, so many installation methods, and so many costs associated with them. I needed to actually put them down in a spreadsheet so that I could see the impact of each design consideration that I was considering. For example, if I installed a Solaredge configuration that used the 8 panels that are already on the roof on the south side, I would have to install scaffolding to the entire front of the house. That extra scaffolding is another £500. Those 8 panels would need 4 more optimizers, 8 more optimizers at £55 each, £440. So that's £940 extra, plus a larger inverter. So you might as well call it £1,000 extra to go for a Solaredge configuration that incorporated those 8 panels. But I'm not actually gaining any more kilowatt hours from those 8 panels. So it's £1,000 extra just for that design consideration. So for me, that really wasn't an optimal design. It would make the garage more optimal and have less inverters and therefore less standby costs of these devices, and it would look nicer and it would look like a more slick, original single implementation rather than every time I do something I add another inverter. But at a cost of £1,000, I think I'd rather have an extra inverter in the garage. So those are some of the things that I've learned by analysing it with the spreadsheets. The garage configuration, that's a bit of a no-brainer because it's so small in the scaffolding that's needed. It's so small with the panels. The panels were, I think they're only like £130, £140 each. They weren't very expensive. And the smaller amount of rails that are required, smaller amount of installation, only needs a 1 kilowatt inverter. Adding those 3 panels to the garage, yeah, it's a few £1,000s, a couple of £1,000s. But it makes sense, and I can definitely go ahead with that. Extending that to go round the side of the house to put the gable on, that starts to get a lot more complicated because the scaffolding cost is going to increase to £1,300. So suddenly the installation cost is going to increase a lot more. The installation of those 4 panels is slightly harder, so it's going to take longer. There's more wiring of the DC power from the cables through the roof and out the other side and into my garage to get to the inverter. So that all takes more time, so you have more installation costs. So the install costs for doing the 2 parts of this array, the east gable and the garage, is actually going to be more expensive than just putting solar panels on the south-facing roof because it's a more costly installation. So the more awkward your install, the higher the costs relating to install, and that does affect return on investment and how good value it is and whether you're prepared to do it in the first place. And that was the same for the north panels as well. You know, I'd have to put another 500, 800 pounds worth of scaffolding on the back as well, plus lots more optimizers, lots more panel cost, lots more install cost. Like I said, I think the north facing side was about £5,000 on its own. So if I went for all three, it was more like £10,000 to install solar panels. And it was £10,000 to gain a north array that only delivered like 1.1 kilowatts of power in the winter, and an east array that would be partly shaded in the winter, and 3 panels on the garage. So I'm getting very little power in the winter for £10,000. And basically it was analysing it like that made me realise the north facing side was just crazy. It was crazy to go that far. My feelings and love of solar panels is not that extreme, and my bank balance isn't that extreme either. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that made sense and wasn't too technical and too much data in there. I wanted to explain the reasoning and the thoughts behind what I'm doing. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to having extra power, and in my monthly updates being able to update you on how much more power we're getting. I definitely think now we're going to have an excess of power in the summer, and that is part of the plan. My plan long term is to trade energy. I will want to sell it back to the grid. So for the extra that I buy in the winter will be offset by me being able to sell back to the grid at peak times. Especially if we have prices as high as they are now, or anything like it at all, I should be able to save a lot more energy in a home storage battery and sell it to the grid at peak times, making more money and making the system pay for itself a bit better and be more efficient with my costs around energy. As always, thanks for watching. Really hope you enjoyed that. And if you haven't subscribed, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Big push on subscribers. Can you believe it? I'm getting near 10,000 subscribers. At the rate we're going at the moment, it could come within just a couple of months. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed, please do. Let's get me over 10,000. It does seem like YouTube is starting to push the videos a little bit more with the algorithm at the moment. The views on the videos are going up, so there's more of you enjoying these. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for joining me on the journey, whether it be for electric cars, solar panels, home storage batteries, or home heating with electricity. That's the other side, isn't it? Monthly update coming soon. That'll be my next video. Take care. See you again soon. Bye for now.